live, and we're on air. So this is hashtag Love Write Create, and I'm Kallie Ross, the author of Descent, a YA adventure novel, and I have with me the lovely and talented Morgan Wylie.
Hello.
And I also have the lovely and talented Gaby Robbins.
Hey.
And tonight we are talking about subplots. Now, I titled this Subplots Should Not Be Subpar, and I thought that would be kind of appropriate because last week we talked about plotting, and we got like heavy into the idea of plotting. And if you go check out any of our blogs, I think you can go and see and find all of our links and all the different worksheets that we use. And we even are going to refer back to one of the finds that Gaby had last week, which was a plotting sheet based off of the Harry Potter novels. Because all three of us could not disagree with the plain fact that the subplotting in Harry Potter is just as good, if not better, than the actual plotting. So before we actually get started with that, I do want to ask you ladies if there are any YA, adult, it really doesn't matter, I guess, novels that stand out to you, other than Harry Potter, as having amazing subplots. Like really more like unforgettable subplots is the best way to put it, I think.
Yeah.
And Gaby, you're like over there nodding your head like, yeah, I have some. I know some. So what are you thinking?
I would say the Rick Riordan series, the Percy Jackson, because those subplots run through all of the Percy Jackson's original series, and then they even run through the other series, and that's the Heroes of Olympus, I think.
Yeah, it is.
So good. Such that, because it's, of course, it's mythology, which kind of is like a ding, 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 that's awesome, I remember that. But then, too, he refreshes it, and then he, like, ties them all together. It's like it's exactly kind of like the J.K. Rowling thing, where you learn about someone in the first book, and in the seventh book, it's like a huge person and so important, you know? So those are really, really good books that have really good subplots. Yeah. That's one for me.
Okay. What about you, Miss Morgan?
Okay, let's see. I have a couple. So here's one. The Shadow Falls series by C.C. Hunter. It's just fresh in my mind since I just recently read it. So I think that one had some good subplots in it. There was a lot going on, a lot of different characters who all had their own issues and relationship things and new discoveries, and it really kept the stories flowing and moving and interesting, and I thought those were pretty well done.
Okay. What else? Do you want to go over another one, or do you want to?
Sure. I could mention one. This is an adult paranormal by Kelly Armstrong called the Otherworld series. It is a 13-book series where each book, almost each book, switches narration of the characters, and there's all these different types of beings, and so each book is focused on, say, one of the witches, or then the next book is focused on the wolves, or so, but they all have an overarching plot where all of they tie in together, but they each kind of have their own stories going on within the big story. So I love those. I think they're great. They're adult though.
Okay, but there are 13 of them, and you've read all of them, and they're finished?
Oh, yeah.
Wow. That's a lot of books.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I can see as an author writing 13 books in my career, but I can't imagine them all being the same series.
Yeah, it's a world. Well, and then she has a young adult series called the Darkest Powers series, and it's also set kind of in the same world, but in this own little pocket and scaled down and with teenagers. But every once in a while they'll bring in one of the characters from the other book. So it's kind of like she's got this huge world with two parts merging. It's cool.
Yeah. I mean, it kind of makes me think J.K. Rowling could do that with some of her characters from the Harry Potter series.
Sure. Yes,
Yeah, for sure.
That would be wonderful.
Well, okay, so I was thinking about this question my first thought was Cassie Clare's series, The Mortal Instruments, and it's not because The Mortal Instruments is my favorite, but it's because the subplots and the backstory in those novels actually spurred on the Clockwork series. That is my favorite. I mean, my absolute favorite. And the subplots in that series are so stinking amazing. I mean, just blow my mind. So that's one other than Harry Potter. I think that there are a ton. I think that for me, when I think of, and I'm looking at my bookshelf over there, that's why I like turn my head. I think that the problem with me is that there are so many great novels, and that's why subplots are so important. Because the ones, the novels that really stand out to us as being great novels, they do have those great subplots.
Right.
So that's why we're talking about it. Have either of you worked on subplots before? Ooh, Morgan, have you ever in your series?
Well, I mean, in a sense, because I've, been tying them into my series, kind of have to, but to work on it specifically and focus on it, no, I'm ashamed to say I have not.
Okay. Well, I have done some research. Now, this is not tried and true. Like you and I and Gabby, we've all decided that the stuff we do, we're trying it. We're letting people know if it works for us, and hopefully it helps other writers. I think that it also is kind of a neat little window into our brains for those people that read our books. But Gabby, I want to know, with this novel, have you worked on any subplots so far?
I think indirectly I have, like Morgan's kind of thing. In the story, there are subplots that I kind of have, through the story, but I kind of am excited to work on them specifically and kind of be more intentional about that, because there are some serious subplots happening, and two subplots like emotionally for my main character. Why she does what she does and the reasons that she does what she does. Plus, there's a big part of the battle and the things that she's doing that has to do with the thing that triggers it all. That is kind of like the biggest betrayal that she can ever imagine. So getting through this, adventure, she's doing it with a lot on her shoulders. So there's all these small emotional subplots, but I also feel like because I have so many characters, kind of like Kelly does, that there's going to be more, and I need to kind of focus in on them, so I'm kind of excited about this.
Okay. Well, are you guys ready for this article that I found?
Yeah.
Okay, I think it's pretty brilliant, and I read like 2 or 3, but I'll try and condense the ideas into something simpler because we don't have like a ton of time, because I do want to ask you guys some more questions and talk about Harry Potter a little bit. But I'm going to do a share screen so that everyone out there in the world can actually see, including you, what I've got going on here. And it is just something that I think that you guys are going to be fascinated with.
I got that one. That's the one that I got.
Oh my gosh, it's so good. It's and here, let me go. Tell me if it's scrolling up, but it's 7 ways to add great subplots to your novel. And
nice.
The reason I found it and the most fascinating is because it says to add great subplots. So no matter where you are in the writing process, there's still hope. You can, whether you're halfway through your first novel, whether you're going through revisions, whether you're first starting, this is a great place to get some ideas. Now, again, the writer of this blog post talks about weaving the subplots into your story. And then talks about spinning subplots, which I thought was fascinating. But there are different types of subplots. Did you guys know about this?
I just read it because I read that.
Yeah. So I encourage people to go in and take a look at the different types, because the coolest thing about this is that I think we need to focus on the fact that our subplots start with our characters. So when you want people to know things about your characters, or if you want to use those sub-characters to be a part of the subplot or to spark the subplot, these are different ways you can do it. So there's like the isolated chunk. And again, when you're scrolling through this, it tells you how to do it. You forget transitions and just start a new section or chapter, tell your story within a story, and then return to your main narrative. Parallel lines. start your story with your main plot and get going with your chief cast of characters, especially your hero, then insert the beginning of your second plot, and then switch back and forth between the stories. The Swallowtail, I thought some of these titles were fascinating. And he goes into great detail about what these subplot structures look like and then also how to implement them. The fourth one is the In and Out. And he also gives, one thing I think is neat is he gives these classic novels as a reference. So if you've read To Kill a Mockingbird, it's a great example of what the In and Out subplot structure looks like. The bookend, the bridge character, and then also the clue. So I'll have to give a shout out. It's Brian Clems. This is the guy that wrote it. But I thought it was so interesting. I was really impressed by it. And one of the main things I really loved about it was that it talked about how you have to start with your characters. So we've talked about this. We have our characters pretty much set up. So can you guys, like, just hearing that idea of starting with your characters, can you think of like 2 or 3 characters that you would love to use to inspire those subplots?
Yeah, absolutely. I've got a lot of sirens. Like, I know that I'm going to have a subplot between Delphine, who you meet in the beginning of the book, and with Lorelei, the main siren. So, like, I know for sure there's a subplot there already. And then, yeah, there's definitely, I think with almost all of my characters, there's a possibility of a subplot. So, yeah.
Morgan, do you think that there's like a way for you to incorporate some of this into what you're already writing? Because you're in the middle of a series.
Yeah, I think so. I hope so. I think especially as I'm moving into my 3rd book, I'm going to be focusing a little more on some of the secondary characters. So I think that's a way I can do that more. Also, and tell me if this is not correct, but with my novella on Dagon, is that considered a subplot even though it's its own book? Because it's his backstory, right?
Well, it's his backstory, but I think the fascinating part about all of this is that it's not just backstory. A subplot is, think about the chart we talked about last week, the ups and downs. The subplot is that individual character going through personal ups and downs. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Hold on. I started one. Like, I have a character, and you guys know who this is. I have a character, Stella, in my novel, and she does not have a point of view. Like, I have her voice is not heard, but her best friend's voice is. And so I was thinking, I need this character, Stella, to go through some stuff. And while I was writing it, nobody steal this, please. But I did this for the 1st book, where it's like her ups and downs in the story. But there are things that we won't necessarily hear from her. We're going to hear from whoever's voice is telling the story. Mm-hmm. Whether it's an omniscient third person, or if it's a first person. But mm-hmm. there are things I want the audience or the reader to hear about what she's going through. I think it develops your characters, not just your main character, but all of your characters. Mm-hmm. But it also it can reveal, and this is one thing that I think is similar to a novella, it can reveal backstory and information that you want heard, but you don't want your main character or your narrative to just blatantly like give an info dump through. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, because like this next one, I plan on doing some things with Raina.
Okay.
So I think she will have her own kind of subplot going on.
Very cool. Well, I'd like to go ahead and talk a little bit about Harry Potter, because I think that that's going to be the best example that we can give. I printed mine out. This is like you wish that you had J.K. Rowling's note sheets for real, like her Have you ever heard her tell her story about all, I know that Gaby has. Morgan, about all the spiral notebooks and stuff she kept. Can you imagine having that many notes?
It's crazy.
Well, okay, so with this, we just so everybody knows, this is on the website. You can look it up, and it's just a JPEG file of a picture of what. These are all of the titles of the novels. Down. Wait, yes. No, across. And then down you have, it's almost like a timeline, but then all the different things that are happening, and then where they are in each of the books, whether they're in a book or not in a book. So as far as Harry Potter's concerned, Gaby, what is your favorite subplot in Harry Potter?
Oh gosh, really? You're gonna ask me that?
Yeah. And listen, think about it, because it's probably gonna be who your favorite character is, other than.
It's not my favorite character, but it's my favorite subplot because it made me think the hardest, and it was the most heartbreaking. And that was, and I'm not going to remember his name now because I have no memory whatsoever. The son who lined up with the Death Eaters, and then he betrayed his father.
David Tennant. That's all I know.
Huh?
The actor's name was David Tennant.
Yes, David Tennant. So that character, I feel like such a loser Harry Potter fan right now. Why can't I think of his name? Because I can see him visually. Anyways, the idea of his father hiding him, and just the thought process of, okay, from the beginning, he's in the book, but you don't know it, and then his dad recognizes him, and it boggles my mind just how good it is. Like, it's just so good. It's also very detective-y. Like, I love that I have to try to figure it out, and she's left all these little bits and pieces for you to figure out. And I feel like that was probably one of the better translations to movie, was with the little lip thing he did so that he would recognize him. But anyways, yeah, that's my favorite one.
He played Barty Crouch Jr.
Yes.
Oh, yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay.
That whole storyline was fantabulous to me. I loved that whole storyline. Because, what was funny was that I didn't suspect him for any of it, like, throughout the book until the very end. But I suspected the guy who was the big Quidditch player, who was, like, he was kind of, he had lost his, his clout or whatever, but he was the one that was working for oh my gosh, I have no memory. Anyways, I thought all along he was the guy that was doing stuff wrong, but in reality it was Barty Crouch and Barty Crouch Jr. I don't know. Anyways, that was fabulous to me.
Well, and the thing that's cool about that is that the way he was able to do it, she revealed with the polyjuice potion in, like, the first book.
Exactly.
Anyway, it's one of those things that, everything ties together so well.
Yes.
And she knew exactly what was going to happen in book 5 or book 7 in book 1.
Well, and the best part, too, was that Snape is suspecting Harry of stealing from him, you remember? And he pulls him aside, and he's like, why are you stealing these things from me? In reality, it was Barty Crouch Jr., who was acting like Mad-Eye Moody, who had been stealing. Yeah, fabulous. I mean, it just, yeah. I just want one subplot it's that good. It was just so fantastic. It was that good.
Okay, so Morgan, what about you? Do you have a favorite subplot?
Okay, let's see. I don't know if it's a favorite or not, but I like the Neville Longbottom plot. His story, how he, is kind of this nerdy little guy, and then he just kind of grows and becomes, who he becomes, and his whole family situation and story and why he is that way. I like him. He's the story is endearing.
Yeah, and his plot or subplot reminds me of, like, that bookend subplot. Like, he has a moment at the beginning, and he has a moment at the end, and he's consistently there throughout the whole thing.
Yeah, the best part of that subplot, though, is that Voldemort tried to kill Harry because he thought Harry was the one that was going to destroy him. Mm-hmm. And could have been Neville.
Yeah.
Right.
And in the end, it was Neville, and Harry. But really and truly, it was like, it was so good. Like, at the end of it, you're like, oh my gosh, he did it. And it's like, love that.
So I think that Gabby's going to get stuck watching this tonight all night long, the whole series.
Yeah, we watched it last week. We've been going through them again.
Oh, so
I wait until
good.
it gets cold outside. That's one of my favorites.
Yeah, that's true.
Yes.
Okay. So I'm gonna go out on a limb here and just say that my favorite subplot is probably Snape's, just because I know that he's like, you love to hate him, but I feel like that even his backstory with Harry's parents, and the promises that he makes Dumbledore, just all of that I just think is fascinating, and how he's the Half-Blood Prince, and how, just everything. So yeah, look at you, Gabby. So yeah, I think that and Dobby's right up there with me too.
Yes.
And I think that was a true testament to Harry's character building. Him being responsible for another creature or being. Anyway. So
I will say one subplot I didn't like was Hedwig. I did not like that subplot.
You like Hedwig, you don't like the ending to Hedwig.
I don't like how Hedwig ends.
No.
It was very disturbing. Like, it bothered me. I got it, but at that moment, I was like, oh, crap. This is just going to be a bloodbath. Everyone's going to die. Like, at that point, I had no hope. Like, I had no hope that anything was going to be good and right in the world.
Yeah.
It was bad. I mean, I feel like it was necessary, but I will tell you that it was probably one of the harder ones for me.
Yeah, I cried.
Well, Morgan, was there a subplot that you didn't like?
Well, I gotta be honest, I didn't like a lot of Goblet of Fire. So I guess some of the stories in there I didn't really care for. Maybe, I mean, I still enjoyed the book and I love it, but yeah, I didn't like oh no, I lost his name. Robert Pattinson's character.
Cedric Diggory.
Cedric Diggory. Yeah, I didn't really care for his.
Well, his storyline, I don't think it had an impact as a whole on the story. And again, that's when the whole Barty Crouch Jr. thing came out. So that should have been, I guess, what was more more visible. But again, when you compare the books to the movies, like, I really don't think Cedric Diggory was such a big deal in the books as he was in the movie. So it's one of those things where you have to take it and you have to ask yourself, well, was it really that huge in the book? I don't remember it being that big a deal. Okay, so anyway, if you're interested in this and seeing how this works, like, I don't know how to best explain it. Gabby, you tried to explain it, and then I looked at it, and then I was like,
a little lost.
Cray. But I mean, like, there's even, and again, I'm not even sure that she wrote it or if somebody else wrote it.
Right.
But either way, it is true to what happens in the books and what the characters' subplots go through. I mean, it even goes through Tonks and Lupin, and how their subplot has an effect on what happens in the story. One thing that you don't even think about with Harry Potter, the creatures have just as much of an influence. Yeah. Like, Nagini is one that's mentioned. Gosh, it's just crazy. It's crazy how they all, like, you think about all of the creatures in the forest outside of the school, but it's all here, so you can take a look at it. And now that you know that it's there, you all have to write subplots as great as J.K. Rowling.
No pressure.
No.
Well, I was thinking about how to best do this, like how to best achieve writing good subplots, or at least creating good subplots and then weaving them into the story as you go. And for me, I'm a visual person, so I automatically went to, okay, I've got to chart it, like we talked about last week with that slope. Do you think that when you start working on subplots this week, because that's going to be your challenge, do you think that there's a cap on the number of characters you can work subplots through?
In general, or for us this week?
In general. I think in a novel. In general, in a novel.
I don't know. I think if you're able to keep track of them and they have significant parts to play that affect everything throughout the book or series, I don't know if there's a cap, as long as it's not just like this cluster of characters and they're everywhere and nobody knows what's happening. I think it depends on the person and if they can keep them straight.
Okay. So it has to be clear.
Yeah, I also feel like if you bring up a subplot, like if you bring up an issue or you bring up a magical item or you bring up something, you need to have a conclusion or bring it to fruition or something, because I can't tell you how many books that I read that I'm like, because I am that person that's like, why did they talk about that book with the blue cover? Because why would you say that book with the blue cover that meant something unless it meant something? Because I have problems that way. If you start a subplot, you have to finish it. So I feel like when it comes down to how many should be in a book, I think length is a big deal. I think how the subplots add to the overarching arch or you know what I'm saying?
Plot. You're good.
The plot, then great. But I don't think you need to put subplots in there just to have them. If they're not really adding to, you know, the culmination of what's supposed to happen at the end of the book, then I don't want to know about it, you know? It's cool to have character. I think, too, maybe people get confused with, like, subplots and having, like, character bios or, like, information about characters, because it's so interesting to know their backstory, but at the same time, is it important to getting to the end of this, you know, adventure or whatever you're doing? So, like, for Morgan, like, it's so important to know in that novella what Dagon's backstory was. She didn't feel like it needed to be in that book, and so she did a novella, which I am not complaining about because I wanted to know everything about Dagon. So I feel like stuff like that, you've got to be careful. You know, could a subplot be a novella, you know, so that you're not taking up all of that time, you know, talking about backstory to get to the end of the book, that kind of thing. So I think you have to balance it out and feel it out.
Well, and that's one thing I think is crucial to the subplots, is that you complete that, whether it's an outline or whether it's a visual slope, like you write it out so for that character individually, so then you can decide, is it something that's crucial to my story? And if it's not, then maybe I don't need it. And then you have the novella, or you have something else. And I'm glad you brought that up, because I actually have, I made these today. Okay, so you know how we are with our, like, pictures of people. I'm one of those, I do the character bios. So, like, this is my Winifred and my Ferris and their brother and sister. So I have my description of them, and what I'll probably do is this right here is a main plot. This right here is a potential subplot, but I will write that subplot out. And if he goes out to a bar and meets some girl and it has nothing that pertains to the story, then there's no reason for me to write about it, because he's not my main character. And I think that that's the key, is to make sure you're not over-inundating your reader with so much stuff that they can't not only keep it straight, but that it muddles your main plot, or it takes over your main plot. Like, you can't have something happen in a subplot that overshadows what your main plot is. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it's a good point.
So with that being said, is there anything else you guys can think of when it comes to subplot, that you want to share, or that you can think of that people should know about?
No.
Dead air, ladies. I'm kind of excited to see what happens this week, and I want to challenge you guys to do 2 characters subplots.
Okay.
I think that's feasible, especially even if you have a crazy week, just doing 2. And really, it's not. This is another thing. This is not an outline. This is more like we talked about last week. The plot, like what's happening in the first part, in the middle, and in the second part, or in the third part, like our Act 1, Act 2, Act 3, and where if something happens that's great, what's going to knock them down, and then once they're down, what's going to give them hope to keep going. And I think that once you've done that, maybe once, twice, at the most 3 times, then that's your subplot. Because if it's happening more than that, it's going to be distracting from your main plot arc. So, so it's really just some like points that you're wanting to make. And if you're feeling the JK, then feel free to do a heck of a lot more. And come back next week and let us know how either well it worked or how awful it was. But anyway, so that's my challenge.
So do either of you have any worksheets already that would be good starting places, or just asking?
Well, Gaby mentioned that she found a couple of worksheets, and if she sends me the link, I'll make sure to post them. I thought about also reposting your narrative writing chart, because I think that could be applicable to a subplot as well as it is to the other. But I also think that even just making a list and then drawing out your own chart would work. But I'll try to post a chart, quote unquote, a chart that could be used. But I think that depending on your character, it may not just be up and then down. It may be up, down, up, way down, and then they find some resolution at the end. But I also think that one thing that's really crazy about this whole plotting and subplotting thing is that with my story, when it comes to the individual, like book 1, you're still not at the end. So you're still allowed to have, I think, a little bit of unresolvedness to it. So I don't want you, like, I know, Morgan, you're working on a series. Gaby, I know you're working on a series. So when it comes to this, if you feel it and you want to work it all the way out to the end, go for it. But if you also you're feeling it for what you're writing right now, just keep that in mind as well, that it may not be the end resolution that you're looking at it. It may be the end of book 1 or book 3 or book 5 resolution.
Cool.
That sounds great.
Okay. Well, I'm done talking. I feel like I talked too much tonight.
No, never.
I'd like to hear you talk.
Blah, 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 blah. Well, I hope you guys have a good week.
You too.
I'm thinking about doing something a little crazy this week.
What?
I'm thinking about scheduling my television and social media. It's so difficult. Like, I like to just have it on. I like the sound of the television, or I like to just check Twitter when somebody retweets something, and it makes me not write.
Distraction, yes.
So check me next week on that. Accountability is key.
Yes.
Sounds good.
Okay. Well, I hope you guys have a good week.
Yeah, you too.
We'll talk to everybody later.
Bye.